Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today we have a fascinating conversation in store for you on neuroscience, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism. Joining us today are our distinguished U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Visual Art, and Ben Ballweg, our Director of Longevity Outreach. And our special guest today comes from Sydney, Australia. Dr. Avinash Singh is a lecturer and assistant professor at the School of Computer Science at the University of Technology, Sydney, or UTS. He is the founder of the India Future Society, which is a think tank. He is also co-chair of the IEEE Neuroethics Framework for the Workplace, sponsored by IEEE Brain, and a member of the IEEE Standards Committee on Unifying Brain-Computer Interface, or BCI. Additionally, he is a member of Transhumanism Australia and actively advocates for promoting transhumanism. In 2021, he was awarded the Google TensorFlow Faculty Award to support and promote his work in BCI. Dr. Singh completed his Ph.D. in computer science in 2019 at UTS in Australia, collaborating with the Technical University of Berlin, Germany, the University of California, San Diego, and the U.S. Army Research Lab. Prior to earning his doctorate, he received a master's in software systems in 2013 from the Birla Institute of Technology and Science in Pilani, India. Working at the intersection of machine learning, cognitive neuroscience, and mixed reality, Dr. Singh is dedicated to designing and developing real-world neuroadaptive BCI systems. His current research interests include integrating artificial intelligence technologies with cognitive neuroscience knowledge to explore cognitive functions, discover relationships between brain dynamics, evaluate everyday interactions, and make decisions to develop robust next-generation neuroadaptive BCIs. And he has some fascinating ongoing projects, including the UTSX Dream Recording Project, which aims to reconstruct dreams from brain signals, neuroadaptive BCI applications that focus on improving interpersonal communication, confirmation bias understanding, collaborative robots, spatial learning and awareness, and sensory augmentation to enhance fluent mobility for blind individuals. And all of these are areas that I would like to delve into in the course of this salon. But first, welcome, Dr. Singh. We're happy to have you as our guest today. And to begin, could you please tell us your assessment of where brain-computer interface technologies stand today, what they're able to achieve today, and what you believe their promise is both in the near-term future as well as over a more extended time horizon?
Thanks, Gennady. That's a quite nice introduction, and thanks everyone here attending and listening to me. Well, BCI, in a very simple single word, I think it's the next emerging technology. AI is already now, but BCI is the next. It's already on the wave for a while, but it's even better. It's even evolving faster than ever before, thanks to whatever happening with artificial intelligence recently. Now, why BCI is important and where it's heading? So obviously, the major aim and goal or motivation of BCI came from medical health or mental health, if I say so, or helping people with disability, because you essentially can communicate directly from your brain to any part of your body. That's the idea originally. But it evolved from medical application to pretty much everywhere in the field, with healthy people, with enhancement, with augmentation, and so on. And somehow what artificial intelligence is, how it's supporting us in day-to-day activities, BCI gonna boost this further up, kind of connecting you directly with a computer, for instance, or even continuously measuring you. For instance, I mean, very simple example of BCI application can be derived from how we use Apple Watch, for instance, measuring our sleep quality and so on. BCI also able to do that. It just, there's a problem in terms of the hardware is not small enough, it's not robust enough at this moment. What we're going to see down the road, BCI application, where not people measuring their sleep quality and so on with their watch, but with their brain, which is a hub where all these are generating, this signal is coming up. So that's where we're heading with the BCI. So you can see, I prefer to call this in four terms. Sometimes I define METR, meter. M stand for monitoring. BCI are going to be a lot for monitoring purpose, individual as well as from external point of view, for like a workplace kind of setting. It could be used for enhancement, obviously. It could enhance your existing belief, existing cognitive states, like you can handle more workload, more stress, and so on, or even sustain attention for a long period of time. It could be used for training, obviously, like you mentioned, dream machine kind of example. And we spend like 1/3 of lifetime sleeping. So essentially could be train yourself with the help of BCI in the future in your dream. So, and very last one, which is also very interesting, is resilience. So BCI can also use for resilience purpose, where something happening a lot with you, generally in mental health space, but also beyond mental health, a task where you kind of are going well above and beyond what your mental capacity allow you. Resilience is another direction where BCI could help. So these four categories, most I think this category very well apply to healthy people, but as well as a whole range of mental health and application in people with disability is just so many with the BCI. So that's where BCI is heading in, and I would not surprise. Thanks to some of the big companies pouring a lot of money, and everyone knows a Neuralink, for instance, from Elon Musk, and even Facebook or Meta now, and there are a couple of other companies, including some of the defense companies or defense organization like a DARPA in US, funding a lot of BCI project or neurotechnology project, if I say so. These kind of pushing the boundaries of BCI currently facing, and within few years, not too long, we might gonna see some of amazing application of BCI which never have seen before.
Yes, thank you very much for that overview. And I'm curious with regard to the physical implementation of BCI technologies. We have seen various degrees of invasiveness. Of course, Neuralink is quite invasive. One has to essentially drill a hole in the skull of the patient receiving the Neuralink, whether that be one of the chimps in the experiments that were performed, or the recent human patient who got a BCI. Of course, that person had a severe disability, and having that kind of invasive approach can help a person overcome the disability and regain lost functionality. So that may be worth the risk or the invasive procedure. On the other hand, a BCI that is intended in a healthy person to augment a capability or give some insight, for instance, into a dream which you're working on, or I know there have been companies that have created these helmets with electrodes that people could put on to help them meditate, for instance, and express certain brain waves. So that would be less invasive BCI technology, but how would you characterize the prevailing types of BCI implementations today, the degrees of invasiveness, and where this is headed in the future? Would it be possible to have Neuralink-like capabilities with a non-invasive BCI in the coming years?
Well, I really believe the future of BCI is not invasive, at least not invasive what Neuralink or similar electrodes are doing because of limitation of these electrode and how they work. For instance, Neuralink is a good example. We have seen demo a few weeks ago where a disabled person playing game and all sort of things with that implant, very first implant from Neuralink. This implant can focus on very specific part of the brain. In this Neuralink case, what I understood is a motor cortex, which is all responsible for your motor action. So that's where the implant is. That's very tiny area of the implant, and just give you a lot of information about your motor action that allow this person to play games and move their cursor in the computer and so on and so on. So that's what invasive is doing. There are actually another invasive work which is also coming from Australia. Now this company moved to US. It's called Synchron, which that they have a strand electrode that go to your nerve and just spread all over your brain. That's another form of implant or another form of invasiveness. But again, you see, these both of them, if you ask me, or ask this person who have disability, of course there's a way. Is a risk is worth to take in case of what available for you. In that person's case of Neuralink subject, answer is yes. But if you ask me, or maybe ask yourself or anyone in audience, if you weigh the same thing, you will find no, maybe not necessary, I want to have an implant at this moment. So invasiveness might be not a solution, not a long-term solution, at least at this moment. I think what working solution exists now or maybe coming in the future is actually non-invasive. Human are very nice to have a control over technology. I mean, as much as possible. We want to have a BCI, but at the same time, we want a control that we can remove this BCI stuff from our head. So something like a headset, like kind of work I do EEG, although EEG have lots of other issues of signal quality and so on. But there's another range down the road, maybe coming in the future, which is invasive, but it's an invasive which is not so much like a Neuralink, but more of an injectable electrodes. I think that's a future hold if we talk about invasiveness. We might see that down the road, depend on how nanotechnology is progressing, because very much dependent on that, where you can inject electrode in your body and those electrodes go in your brain and broadcast the signal of your brain to your device, and you can do things with that. That kind of invasive is still okay. Why is okay? Because maybe those electrodes dissolve over time, and maybe after a few days or weeks or month, that does not exist anymore in your brain because they just merge into your bloodstream and disappear and exit. But the implant like Neuralink and implant like a Synchron, I mean, it's still a work in progress, but at least Neuralink kind of implant is not new. It's already there from several decades in the past. It just become more commercial now. And since past to now, only people have such implant. They weigh more toward the need versus risk. And that's the future really with these implants. Well, we still hope is pretty high with these implants, but are we going to see with the healthy people? I doubt that. A big question on that part. Unless it's a nice publicity, unless it's nice attraction from the company among people toward the technology.
Yes, indeed. And I myself am a transhumanist. I'm interested in viable human brain enhancement in the coming decades. However, today I would not wish to undergo the risk of getting a Neuralink device implanted in part because I'm of the view that the fewer problems one has with one's current health, the more important it is to be conservative in the kinds of interventions that one pursues to maximize one's existing longevity. But the pathway toward reduced invasiveness, what you mentioned with the injectable electrodes, for instance, seems to be one that could greatly expand the adoption, and it would be fascinating to observe the development of these kinds of technologies. Now, with regard to dream recording, I'm curious, what kinds of technologies have you experimented with already, and what kinds of technologies would, in your view, enable the majority of people to record their dreams and be able to replay them, derive insights from them, maybe even create videos from them?
That's exactly what we're aiming for. Well, Dream Machine project is relatively new. We did few experiment. Well, fundamental idea here: can we record your thoughts? And that's the experiment we did so far with the people who are not sleeping, like awake like me, and we just asked them to think about few stuff in their brain. For instance, very simple as apple, or I don't know, car, or dog, or tiger, so and so on. And we asked them to do this while recording their brain signal using EEG, which is a non-invasive device. And we take that 5 to 10 second long thought signal and reconstruct what they were thinking just with that EEG signal. And fascinating part is that the algorithm or model behind this reconstruction is able to pick up not just so there's a people who were thinking about their dog, but at the same time they were thinking about a specific kind of dog, for example, husky, right? And the same time they're thinking about their dog, which is more looks very furry and yellow in color. Husky are not yellow, by the way. And this reconstruction is kind of using these two information and merging them together. So they're coming up with a dog which look like a husky but a little bit yellow in color, which is fascinating to see. So that's what progress at this moment with this dream project is. At this moment we have so far, which is not published work because we still try to understand what's going on, what's the underlying phenomena of cognitive uh, uh, states and brain dynamics are in play when this reconstruction is happening. Now, taking that thought reconstruction, what we plan to do, because when you are awake, like in this stage, and I ask you, close your eyes and think about an apple, you will find it's incredibly hard to keep that apple in the mind because there's so much things happening in your brain same time. But when we sleep, the same state of thought, which is a dream in this case, is very well constrained, noise free, focus environment. So essentially, when you dream, you are not affected by your random thoughts because you are in unconscious state essentially. And same time, some noise which coming from your ear or eyes are also stopped. You are not moving as well because you are on the bed, lying on the bed as well. So we thought, why not we try same thought reconstruction put together with someone sleeping and try to reconstruct as fast as possible and stitch these reconstructed image together to come up with a video kind of thing. I mean, this is something on progress, so we haven't successfully able to do that so far, but that's what we aiming for. And this dream recording essentially, so logically it's very simple. Whenever you are in the REM sleep, which is a sleep when you start dreaming, we just start recording, and when REM sleep ends, we just stop recording. So essentially we detect when the dream start and when dream stop. And this, when you wake up in the morning, dream might be in your phone as a video, and you can just play and reflect on yourself what your unconscious mind is trying to tell you. Why this project are important, why we are doing that, that's might be a question for so many people who want to use that, of course. Well, first of all, as a science person or a scientist in this kind of research, I'm very keen to develop this technology. Now, once technology is there, we were able to successfully record the dream. Recorded dream is not just reflecting what your unconscious brain is telling you, but as well as it can be used for lots of mental health treatment purpose. Like I mentioned before, we sleep 1/3 of our lifetime spent in sleeping. That's a big chunk. And really, dream world or this whole world of sleep is still so much unknown. We have lots of information, we do learning, we do training, we do this and that, but really it's really untouched, untapped world of. And the one reason is when someone wake up and report information to a doctor is very subjective. They describe what they have feel. I mean, you might have nightmare, or you might have very happy dream or very sad dream, and so on. But you only reflect this in a subjective way. And for example, in my case, I'm just want to give you an example. Most of the time when I wake up, it happened with so many people, I forget my dream. I could not recall it. There are people like that, and there are people who are lucid dreamer as well, and there are people who can't dream at all. And it also affected by your mental state from that day, or maybe from your work stress all over the period of time, and so many food intake and everything is all affected your sleeping and sleeping pattern and your dream itself. So recording that information is also open up lots of possibility for analyzing for mental health purpose, because essentially once you know what's going on in your unconscious brain, which is essentially a trigger sign of so many things, it's possible to intervene and further do the treatment. Now that's the one part, but in future I even want to go further, where we not just record the dream but also augment the dream. Now why is that? Because maybe it's a nightmare, for instance, and recording data suggesting is a nightmare category of dream, and you inject some information back to the dream that change that nightmare dream become more happy dream or good dream. Why is that? Because a nightmare, if you wake up with a nightmare dream, generally your mood also reflect that feeling for a while over the day. But if it's injected, make you a bit more happy, it might not happen. You will kept yourself, more positive, more happy throughout the day. So that it sounds like a very sci-fi, but really it's not that complicated as sounds like. But in reality, as a scientist point of view, we still haven't done that, but that's kind of a goal we are heading into with the dream recording project in upcoming months potentially, and maybe something more interesting will coming in the next year, and so some of the early results.
Yes, and this is quite a fascinating prospect. So I am one of those people who is inclined to readily forget dreams unless I think about them essentially the first thing that I do when I wake up. And even then, I only tend to remember the most memorable, the most impactful dreams. So perhaps a few per year, and the actual number of dreams that I have would be in the hundreds per year, sometimes several very detailed episodes per night. And it seems kind of strange to me that my mind forgets all of that very shortly, even though the experience of the dream is quite vivid. So it would be nice to have a recollection and be able to reflect upon it. But I wonder also, how focused is current technology able to get in terms of filtering out the signal from the noise? So if I think of an apple, what sort of image could be produced? Would it be a very grainy apple? Would it be a bunch of pixels that maybe are statistically correlated with the image of an apple? Or would it be close to the actual image of an apple? And what can be done to more effectively filter out the noise?
Well, so current state of art, at least what I have, is apple will be reconstructed, which is recognizable as an apple by looking at it. It's not just dots, it's not just pixel. There might be some color. There's a bit of abstract things might be happening as well behind that apple, which might be related to noise. That's something what we're trying to analyze further into, disassociate noise versus actual signal. Now, noise might not necessarily a noise as well. Our thoughts are just, mixing up so much, like in the awaking world, like when we awake, and that make things a bit complicated for sure. For instance, when we ask people who are meditator, very good, and they are regularly practicing meditation, they are so good to generate reconstructed image. So when they think about apple, it's a nice and clean and greener and red apple very nicely, versus those people who are not so much meditator, they have so much difficulty to just kept this apple in their brain, and they could not come up with very nice output of the reconstructed image. So there's definitely a range, and this range affect what we are trying to do at this moment, and that's what we're trying to train as well. What I just gave an example, these are the example where we haven't calibrated our system with these user. So what I'm trying to say, if you calibrate the system with a user, this thing become even more robust and more profoundly correct without lack of noise. But still, noise is a big issue, no doubt in that. And that's what we're trying to figure out as well within the algorithm, telling algorithm, well, we are performing some experiment now where we're looking at very lower level of information processing in your brain. Essentially, we are not asking model to learn about how to reconstruct apple, but we teaching our model to learn about what color is coming up in your thoughts. If it does it have an edge, does it look like a square or triangle, does it have depth, does it have contrast, and does have multiple color, and multiple objects are there. So very abstract information, because those are the fundamental of how an image might be put together to form something which we recognize. So that's what we're trying to do at this moment. And I think this approach may able to filter out noise versus not noise, or I should say uh, intentional thought versus unintentional thought, which you want to reconstruct. And we are able to separate them out by knowing this very fundamental low level information from the thoughts. So yeah, that's what's happening. We are on the process of performing this experiment, and hopefully we have some interesting result very soon.
Yes, indeed. And I have one more question before we go to the other panelists on the subject of dream recording or thought recording. Is it possible to do a selective recording of one's thoughts? For instance, if you tell me to think about an apple, but not to think about ice cream, but because you told me about ice cream, I'm still maybe tempted to think about ice cream, but I don't want to let you know that I'm thinking about ice cream. So I want you to see the apple that I'm thinking about, but the ice cream, if it comes up in my mind, I would like to kind of withhold. Do you think that would be possible to have the person give you a selective representation of their thoughts?
We haven't done with this technology itself, but I will add on, for instance, what happening with motor cortex, what has been done with Neuralink, and so many motor cortex, or what we call motor imagery related research in the past, invasive and non-invasive. Essentially, you can detect very easily if it's intentional or non-intentional. And by knowing that, you have this control to filter out what you wanna bring on the screen and what you wanna keep holding. So in short answer, feasible, yes, it's feasible to do that. But currently we just wanna just bring everything is coming in your brain. And you raised the interesting point, because those people we asked, so we took this technology and go into public, and we let people try it out. Something called South X Southwest last year in Sydney. I think it's very popular in US, happen in Austin every year if I'm not wrong. But anyway, so it's a very interesting tech festival, and we took this into open public and let people try out. And some of them have this concern. They may have certain thought they don't want to reconstruct, although my technology does not able to reconstruct that either. But they were worrying about this privacy issue. They don't want to bring that thought to screen because it might be not so much they want to show it to openly to anyone. Now, this is what might happen in the now, but in the future, let's say even technology able to reconstruct every single thing coming in your brain, it's possible that model later on can detect and suppress those information as well for your need, for your settings, for your requirement. So what I'm trying to say, there's a multiple level is possible to do from the brain level itself, and later on in the model, in artificial intelligence, machine learning model as well, that you can do suppress certain information and let other information come out from the recording. Did that answer
Yes.
what you're asking? Yeah.
Yes, I think this is a promising answer because for the future, if people use this technology to communicate their thoughts frequently, it would be great to have the ability to communicate those thoughts as directly and immediately as possible. But as a safeguard, there also needs to be the ability for the individual to select exactly what they do or do not communicate and configure the kinds of settings that you described. So I'm pleased to hear that you are exploring that and you see that as part of the future trajectory of development for this technology. So now let us see if Ben and Art Ramon have any questions about dream recording or thought recording using brain-computer interfaces. Any questions on that? Art Ramon?
Yeah, one of the things I'm curious of is I know a lot of the passive, non-invasive type BCIs is basically output. And I know to get input, that's usually what requires an actual invasive type device. Because I've seen one time this one lady, she lost her vision, she lost her eyes, and she had some goggles, and it had like an array that they had an implant into the back of her head, somewhere where the visual cortex is at. Also, I know that people who have like cochlear implants, that's also an invasive, input. So for any inputs, it seems you're gonna need invasive, but for outputs, it's easily available to do that externally for an output. So that's one thing I sort of note. But as far as dream recordings, I mean, I have very vivid dreams myself, and I know that when I'm dreaming, I mean, it's very vivid. I'm not sure what the recording, because I have whole worlds. I mean, they're whole worlds. That's just an apple. I mean, it's buildings, structures, people. I'm interacting with people. I have friends there, and sometimes when I wake up, I'm sad that I came back to this reality. So, how do you envision this whole cinematic type recording? Because I literally have cinematic effects in my dreams, panning, zooming, very cinematic effects in my dreams. It goes from third person to me first person, and goes to an entire, different people when it sees things going on in third person. So anything, how do you envision that happening with dream recording?
First of all, your first question about input, right? Input to brain. Generally, these are implant-based, but we should not forget when we observe or perceive information, we use our eyes, smell, touch, ear, hearing, and so on. This is also input to the brain, right? And you can manipulate that without having invasive implant. So especially for the dream kind of setting, you can just simply use certain kind of sound to manipulate or augment certain signal. So you don't really need an implant. Implant generally required when you want to augment or provide input to the brain electrically. So it's an electrical stimulation in your cortex that essentially sends certain a little current to your brain and just let it, what we call it, some sort of electrical stimulation to your brain using AC or DC sort of thing. That's very true. That's what invasive does. And in fact, one of the most popular one you already mentioned, Cochlear, by the way, is also from Sydney. Cochlear originated in Sydney here. So, and another very great example, which is already exists from at least a decade or even more, Parkinson. Parkinson is a disease where you have uncontrolled motion in your motor limbs, like your hand is keep moving and so on. So there's already a lot of work where people have this implant that based on very similar to what Neuralink does, detect your Parkinson action, like a movement of hand, like an uncontrollable movement, and send back stimulation signal, electrical stimulate signal that suppress those movement and you feeling more in control. It's already there, quite popular, and people who are really extreme cases of Parkinson, you can find video. There's some amazing example out there on Parkinson disease, which is an actual brain implant out there. Now, what kind of input I'm suggesting with the dream, most probably going to be a sound at this moment, because interestingly, sleep can be augmented with sound so easily. And that's what we want to experiment with. Of course, if it failed, it doesn't go, then we have to think about some other ways. But currently, that's the idea. That's what we're heading in. Now, to answer your second question, that's very true. In fact, we have one scale. Scale of how vivid or how detailed information someone can imagine, not just in the dream, but also when you are awake, like at current moment. So there are people who, if they think about an apple, they can't even see the apple in their brain, versus there are people who can see with well rich detail, maybe cinematic detail, like you say, Art. And maybe that's the reason, maybe you're very artistic as well, who knows. So maybe this scale of how well you can think or well, not reconstruct, but how well image can be populated in your brain when you think about it, there's a scale of people. And interestingly, it's called aphasia, I think that's the right word. It's a one kind of a disorder for people. They could not visualize things when they think about it. So it's a 0. Versus there's a completely opposite range of people. When you ask them to think about something, they can visualize it very rich detail. And I came across to one of such person when I'm doing this public demonstration of a dream machine, a dream recording. This person tried to think, and we just getting some random noise in reconstruction. Just the model is not able to pick up the apple, for instance, and we could not reconstruct anything. Versus those people, well, we got meditator. We did not know anyone with so much rich detail and cinematic view, but those are meditator. Their dream information, their reconstruction information, the thought are so clear. So you can already see their range of reconstruction possible. Now, if dream have a lot of information, like you say, Art, of course, I think there might be difficulty, and we are in so early stage, we don't even know how it's gonna work out. But my feeling is that people on the remaining part of the scale where you can have very nice visualization means more input to the model and more information can be reconstructed. Will it be exactly vivid, exactly sharp, clear image? I'm not very sure. But my thinking, that's the reason why we're doing this very low level experiment of very specific feature. Because if we think if this feature can be recognized by your brain signal, and we tell the brain signal to put these pieces together, I think doesn't matter it's a small scale apple or it's a very cinematic apple and so much and other information in your scene, you might able to see that reconstructed information. That's a hypothetically hypothesis we have at this moment, and we're hoping for see that. And you are right. And dream is also not thinking about like an apple, right? It's like a video. You are moving. It's an action based, right? And sometimes you're just looking at the people's face in the dream, or sometimes even you're looking yourself as well in the dream. And dream is just so vivid. Sometimes even I call dream is our biological virtual reality world, essentially, that give you senses. You have a lot of immersive feeling, which none of virtual reality headset out there can provide, what dream can provide to you. And if you have a little bit more control over it, you can record it. I think it would be so amazing to see how it will unfold in different applications in the future, training to entertainment, really.
Yeah, I know. One of the things I notice is that I have a lot of tinnitus in my left ear, and when I fall asleep, it's gone, and I'm not even aware I have tinnitus until I wake up, and then the tinnitus comes back. But yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed. And it would be fascinating to have these personal virtual reality worlds be more accessible, be more subject to control by the individual and application to waking life, if that is what the individual chooses to pursue. So thank you for those responses. And Ben, would you like to ask a question about dream recording or thought recording?
I don't know if I quite am kind of primed for the dream recording thing specifically, but I was curious, just like in the last few months, what some of the most interesting research in the BCI realm in general has been. And I'd like you to feel comfortable getting into the weeds a little bit. I think our viewers get into this subject. So if you want to talk about, oh my gosh, this very specific thing, you might have some receptive audience to it.
Well, like I said, BCI got quite popular recently. I think everyone talking about BCI in the media, BCI here and there. And most probably thanks to company like Neuralink, make it a bit popular in last couple of years. Although they are very implant based, but there's so much work happening in non-invasive world, where you can buy this hardware like EEG with a couple of $100, essentially can perform experiment on yourself. You already know there's alpha, beta, gamma signal, you know, attention, concentration, you may able to measure stress, workload, and so on. And just simply use mix and match with this information to provide input to your games, a robot, or just to reflect a monitoring based kind of information. And so much people are playing around with that. This is already existing. There are so much open source tool. For example, there's something called BCI 2000, which is one of the old tool exists there, or BCI Lab, which is another tool exists there. These tools let you play with the BCI, some fundamental BCI paradigms. Paradigm means signal, for example, motor imagery, I just mentioned, movement, thinking about movement in your brain, and you are able to see this movement output coming from the brain signal, and you can use that information to control, for example, cursor in your computer, very similar to what we have seen in Neuralink, maybe with a little bit low resolution, but very closely related. And people are using such kind of information to implementing a lot with virtual reality, actually. For example, in virtual reality game, I've seen one example, maybe more than a few months ago, last year sometime, where there's a game where someone using I forgot the name of the headset, but it's very popular, commercially available headset. Maybe it's a Emotive. Emotive is a headset out there that give you EEG signal and already give you lots of BCI output as well. And this is just a few $100 of worth. So anyone can buy this hardware off the shelf on Amazon and here and there, and can just utilize for different BCI applications. And that's really what's happening with these interesting people out there. And when I say for mental health, of course, people are very keen to understand their own brain, no doubt in that. And maybe that's the reason where people want to monitor the brain as much as possible. Of course, there's so much cognitive neuroscience behind the scene, and if someone audience interested to try it out, it's the first tense very confusing, and that's where this off-the-shelf hardware with software combination are so nice to try out if someone interested in. It's really very, very straightforward. If someone plug in, and right away you can start seeing the signals that coming from your brain, and that can be utilized. Now, in the past, I mean, there's a one work came out just a week ago from, I think, University of Texas. This work suggests, with the open source resources and code and tools and everything, that is a universal BCI. That's what they call this kind of BCI system, that let you control a bunch of different things with your brain signal. Now, this might be super interesting for people out there, and this is all based on EEG. Maybe emotive can be used. I'm not so sure, but seems like it's possible to use. Now, when I'm talking about emotive kind of sensing headset for EEG signal versus those we do in the lab, the difference between these two sensing unit is only number of sensors they have in there. So for example, headset like a emotive maybe give you a little bit less resolution. It might not spread all over your brain. So maybe you're not getting all the signal from it, versus what we do in the lab setting. Generally, we have a lot of more sensor. The quality of hardware might be very clinical. So we can rely very strongly on the quality of signal coming from the headset, versus this commercial available may not necessarily give you similar quality. And actually, emotive, in addition to emotive, there's another headset, which is my very first headset when I started diving into BCI, which is still exists out there. It's called NeuroSky. Now, NeuroSky is like, if I'm not wrong, it's like $100 and $200 US dollar only, which is really, really very inexpensive EEG headset. And it comes with your apps. You can download app in your iPhone or your Android phone, and you can already right away from the off-the-shelf start playing with your BCI. It comes with a one sensor which touch your forehead and start measuring your attention and concentration level. And you can play the games like making balloon fly and so on. It's so exciting, especially for viewers or audience who might be interested to try. And it's like I say, it's very inexpensive. But there's so much more coming out there. People who know Raspberry Pi kind of thing, or people who know, I've seen, it's a news, I'm not so sure how true it is, but I've seen there's an article talking about Apple is trying to get this earbud EEG sensor. So essentially you have your AirPod have a EEG sensor as well that can continuously measure some sort of a signal from your ear. Not necessarily brain, but something similar. And if that's gonna happen, that means this also give you access of some data and also can be happen something. But this is something may happen in the future because of patented technology. But I know there are some company already selling that sort of headset, that sort of AirPod style EEG headset that can give you sound as well as a brain signal that can be used for lots of things. OpenBCI is another great example. They sell a lot of hardware as well. So you can see hardware is a key element here, really. Once you have the sensor, once you have a headset, there's so much open source tools exist out there that can you rightly hook into accessing those data and converting into BCI. And I think it would be nice to play around with that if someone interested in BCI to understand the word of BCI. And I think that's a way to start with.
Yes, thank you very much. That is a fascinating possibility. I would also like to ask you to discuss a bit regarding your work in neuroadaptive BCI applications. So how can that improve, for instance, communication or learning or overcoming cognitive biases? What types of advances have been made and what types of advances are possible in the near future?
So Neuroadaptive BCI is actually an interesting direction in BCI. You can categorize a BCI into generally 3 categories. One is an active BCI, very much like what you have seen in Neuralink, where actively controlling things on the screen like a cursor. But there's another one is called passive BCI. When I talk about passive BCI, where you don't actively do anything with your brain, just let your EEG headset or any brain signal acquisition unit, let record the signal and do something with that. For instance, what we do with the watch, like a watch continuously measure our sleep, all are passive. We don't have to interact at all. We can simply look at the data later on. So passive BCI is also very much like that. You can measure someone's workload, for instance, if it's a mental workload going well and beyond what's possible for this capacity, someone's stress. And on that same direction, I did something during my PhD called cognitive conflict. So this is a phenomena happen literally all the time with us when we start interacting with something. So for instance, this is a phenomena occur when we know something in the past because of some our cultural knowledge or educational knowledge or any experience. But when we interact with these new things, it comes with very new instruction set that doesn't match with my existing knowledge. And when this mismatch happen with my existing knowledge with the new knowledge, there's something happen in the brain called cognitive conflict. Now, you can measure this information again and again. It happened instantly. So what I found in my research, it happened every around 250 milliseconds, and sometime also around 400 milliseconds, essentially half of second. And you can measure this information and feed into, using some machine learning model, feed into your environment that let you, what I call it, adapt to your brain. So essentially, you can tell the surrounding environment that don't produce so much conflicting information and just try to be aligned with my brain as much as possible. Why is that important? Because more conflict you have, more you have to learn, and more cognitive loaded you will be, more exhausted you will be sooner. It's like if you start learning a bicycle very first time, and let's say you have such a system in your install with you, maybe learning a bicycle take 2 or 3 days, but with this system, it's not just you're learning a bicycle, but bicycle learning you. And somehow you just align to each other, and maybe that 3-day task become 1-day task. In fact, there's some of the work I published on this neuroadaptive BCI with something called PHRC robot. PHRC robot is a kind of robot which is semi-autonomous in nature. It has some intelligence, but something you also have to give instruction in. And this combined instruction with human and intelligence, it just perform a task. And we did this neuroadapt. So that's what we call neuroadaptive BCI, by the way, adapting from your brain signal, essentially. We use this neuroadaptive BCI with a robot with very new learner. And we were able to show in this research that the learning time has been significantly reduced, because you are not just learning robot is also learning from you, or I should say robot is adapting according to your need, and it become very personalized, or I should say hyper personalized robot for your environment. That's one of the work already there, but I thought it can apply to actually so many other things as well. And we did one experiment with psychologists where, well, role play psychologists, we haven't done with actual psychologists yet, where we trying to understand every time you communicate, like I'm telling this information to you, right? It might possible that your existing knowledge on the topic doesn't match with what I'm saying. So it's a bit of conflicting things happening in your brain. Again, you can measure that and maybe inform me, like, because I'm speaking to you, I'm making this statement, tell me that, oh, this person is like in cognitive conflict state. and maybe a model behind it, like an artificial intelligence model, give me a suggested word I can use that make you not feeling conflict. So what will happen in that way? I can frame a sentence that can be taken very positively by you, which might not be happen in the past. It could be, for instance, about climate change. Some people doesn't believe climate change is actually a thing, but some people might have. So this is a confirmation bias. Or political views. Some people may think they have certain belief in political system versus other, or something like a sport. These are some of the topic we did experiment with. So what we did in this experiment, the very first goal we did, can we measure that bias among people? And we find, yes, we can measure with this cognitive conflict. And using that information, we want to frame a sentence which is originally or generally is very biased or judgmental for listener. But using this cognitive conflict information, you can adapt in a way that can convince this person very easily. Same bias statement, same conflicting statement. So you see, what we're trying to do essentially with neuroadaptive technology is making, in other words, persuasive system in a way for the communication purpose. But again, we can use this for interpersonal communication, which you already read what we're trying to do with psychologists, because that's a communication happen a lot where a patient is sharing information to doctor, and doctor is just commenting on that or suggesting some solution on that, and so on. And yeah, there could be lots of unethical thing can go wrong with that kind of technology. That's very true. But you see what happening with social media, or I should say misinformation, is very much around that. Misinformation, why is a misinformation, is essentially sometimes align with your bias. You just keep sharing it. But though there are people who doesn't align with those bias information, and they don't share. And generally they frame in a way that kind of invoke those bias and just excite you to share about it more. But things like neuroadaptive BCI can also tune that information in a way that doesn't invoke those bias, but convey the message in a little bit different way. And so that's the kind of thing we are developing with neuroadaptive technology at this moment. So these two work actually going to be up online very soon. Actually, the robot one is already out there. It's called, if someone interested in, it's called neuroadaptive BCI for physical human robot collaboration. This is some sort of a human and robot collaboration kind of technique. And the confirmation bias in interpersonal communication is currently under review, for instance. So maybe, hopefully in a couple of months, it will be online as well. And it's very exciting, yes, and ethical as well. It could be unethical as well, for sure. I think all BCI technology on the verge of, on very fine line of being ethical versus unethical. So no doubt in that.
Yes, and it would be fascinating to see some applications of that technology. I would be intrigued to check back in a year from now and observe some of these applications and what the results have been. But monitoring of cognitive load or the amount of stress as one goes through one's day, I think could be tremendously helpful for individuals to even figure out what kinds of situations bring on perhaps excessive demands on their minds at a given point in time, and how they could manage those, how they could moderate some of those demands. But in regard to effective persuasion, when we humans try to persuade other people, what we effectively try to do is form accurate mental models of what those people are thinking, at least if we wish to have an impact and we want to speak to areas that they will have some sympathy with, that they will identify in terms of the arguments that we present. So we don't want to be overly antagonistic, for example. We don't want to overly contradict the entire framework within which they view the world, because they would simply reject what we have to say. And more effective persuasion does try to tailor itself to the audience. There are different techniques that work with different people. So this BCI technology potentially could give us more ways to create accurate mental models of other people's minds. And then the question indeed becomes an ethical one. We want to be able to persuade, but we don't want to manipulate. We don't want to create distorted impressions of reality or misleading impressions that could lead people to take suboptimal actions. And of course, this is where a lot of philosophical discussions can be had about what is the distinction between persuasion and manipulation. I do think the distinction is real. So we're talking to an audience right now. We're trying to communicate certain insights. We're not trying to make them into an army of unwitting followers who will do our bidding and act to their own detriment. But there have been some advertisers on social media. There are some political parties and types of political advertising that are very much manipulative. So I do wonder what your thoughts are about how this technology could be deployed in the best possible ways and could avoid the pitfalls that we have seen on social media, say the infamous Cambridge Analytica scandal on Facebook, where essentially micro-targeting was used to figure out exactly what messages would appeal to certain demographics, very granular demographics of consumers. So do you think it's possible to design brain-computer interfaces that are not vulnerable to these same kinds of problems?
In short, well, first of all, what you commented and described is very well articulated, the whole problem of mental modeling. And we should not forget, there are always people around us who are always ready to pursue, convey the information and make you agree with that information and make you do what they're interested to do, right? And generally, these people are very good leader as well known for that. And what we are trying to do, well, I'm using neuroadaptive versus persuasion BCI. That sounds very unethical word or confusing word. Currently, this experiment we are performing is very much relation between a patient and counselor or patient and psychologist, because we want to help. Generally, what happens in the patient and psychologist setting, especially in Australia, and I believe everywhere in the world, you have multiple sessions with your counselor or psychologist, and then this doctor get to understand you and then start providing feedback and comment back on you. But with this sort of technology, maybe those 4 to 5 sessions cut down to 1 or 2 sessions, because you are sort of monitoring the patient as well. And why I'm saying that, because there's no such technology in this medical setting, this mental health setting, which is beyond subjective feedback. So it's very much subjective feedback. We ask patient to rate this and that after discussion with this doctor, and this rating just led by doctor to understand what they really think and then evaluate and then have another session and so on. It's a very slow process. We want to accelerate that process. We want to be a catalyst of the process, so we can reach out or help people with mental health much faster. And mental health is always quite a stigma as well in society, always been there, still there, a little bit better in Western country, but still quite a lot in Asian setting or Asian country, still there. And then you have to go for like a 5 session with the doctor. It's even more complicated. We wanna do something that accelerate the whole process, so you don't have you go first time maybe, and maybe also accelerate the whole process. So maybe 5 sessions reduced to 1 session and you still get the same help. But your second question, I think, around can we use this for more of a fake news or Cambridge Analytica kind of thing, or advertising in general? And I think this particular year, 2024, there's some of the major country having election, right? Including India, where I come from, and so many other countries as well. And all generative AI out there and social media out there, this combination is such a disastrous for manipulating people and also influencing their decision, what they're gonna vote, who they're gonna vote for. And election is where Cambridge Analytica also pop in the past, how they use this technology to manipulate people, identifying people who are they are. In fact, we also proposed an experiment 2 months ago, and we're hoping to get some sort of a funding in regard to do some experiment. We call it cognitive nudging. So you want to nudge people with the help of BCI that encourage them to not just very quickly believe what misinformation or fake news is popping up in front of them, but do a little bit more investigation. So essentially creating this habit with the help of confirmation bias, or what I call cognitive conflict, or in other words, neuroadaptive BCI. We come up with this idea, we come up with this proposal, and in this proposal, we propose a model, an approach, which is a combination of brain signal and machine learning model, mostly machine learning model, because we can't expect everyone wearing BCI device, right? So we want to teach this machine learning model how to nudge people into certain degree that encourage them enough. I mean, it's like if it's a fake information detected by a tool, then you reframe what has been presented in that fake information and kind of encourage you to develop an habit that let you further explore the fact behind it, which does not happen if you are too much biased towards certain area of interest. And this happen a lot in political setting. People, and why political setting? Because political setting generally pick up those topics that can have a lot of bias among people. It could be simple as, I don't know, jobs, migration, and so on. And so nudging people with the cognitive information or BCI-based information, let's call cognitive information, it's not really interface, letting the model learn about those information and then using a technique that can nudge people in certain direction. I think this technology could help positively a lot with a case like fake news, misinformation, and anything like Cambridge Analytica in the future as well. Of course, this kind of model has to be keep up to date. So we're hoping to run something like that. We have some ideas, proposal, and everything. And like I said, we're waiting to get some sort of a supporting funding. So they put resources to run some experiment around that. Yes. But currently what we're doing is we're doing pretty much with this counselor and patient setting. This model essentially going to reflect also on other kind of work we want to propose in that direction.
Yes, and I could definitely see the benefits in the patient counselor setting, especially in terms of establishing context, which is a lot of what the counselor would try to do to gather information from the patient. But in terms of broader persuasion, of course, in the Transhumanist Party, we have observed over the years that there are certain issues, and they're often identified as wedge issues, where people are very strongly polarized and they have a lot of these biases that they bring in with them when they encounter any sort of information about these issues. And it's very easy for these biases to cloud any sort of ability to perceive facts or communicate facts. So if there could be techniques using this BCI technology that would enable people to just circumvent those biases and be able to consider the facts directly without also suspecting the source. Because right now there are, for instance, fact-checking websites and organizations, but they themselves could have biases. And many people, I think with some justification, suspect them of having biases. And then indeed it is possible to set up an ostensible fact-checking organization that really does very strongly take a side on a wedge issue. And so I think having an impersonal technology that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have a preconceived side in any sort of contemporary conflict, might motivate people to consider what is true and approach these ideas and these areas more rationally. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to ask you about your work in sensory augmentation. So this could help blind individuals. And I'm curious, do you think it's possible to use brain-computer interfaces to even restore the capacity for sight? So if, for instance, one's eyes are not capable of providing input to the brain, could, for instance, there be a camera instead that's connected to the optic nerve, and the brain could directly see what that camera is able to record or register?
Yeah, sensory augmentation project is very interesting. Relatively sit next to BCI, maybe not necessarily you can call it BCI. And what you're talking about, can we convey information from the eyes to visual cortex, for instance? There are work, for example, called bionic vision. It's very popular, also came from Australia first time, where not us, but a team of researchers, I think from one of the university, they were able to have this implant in your eyes that pick up the signal and convey the optic nerve what's happening. And people can see, although very low pixel, but something like I think 4x4, which is like 16 pixels. And even they went a little bit beyond that to let your visual cortex see and perceive information from environment. That was very interesting. But you see, the title of what we are trying to do is called sensory augmentation, which is a little bit different in a way. I always give an example of if people are familiar with Daredevil, a superhero, right? If you know what I mean. This superhero have some sort of a superpower that let him, this superhero blind, and let this superhero visualize the whole environment just by sound. It's like a sonar, but not really a sonar. And we all know bats using this sonar kind of capacity to hunt down their mouse and other predator they want to catch. And some of the other sea animal like a dolphin and whales and so on, they also use sonar kind of capability. And one automated version, or I should say human developed version, like a submarine, they also see in the blind view, right? They're using sonar to hear and understand. So these are all are based on sonar. We are not developing sonar either, but we want to enable a capacity which is very much like you can visualize the whole environment in your brain just using the sound. You don't want to create a new eyes for blind people. No, that's not a goal. You just want to use the sound to invoke some sort of a new senses that and augment their sensory capability of hearing, become more like a visual hearing. They can visualize stuff in the brain. Now, what and how we are doing that? We are creating, I mean, again, this work is running from last about 3.5 years with the help of a company who are developing this sort of glasses, because we still need some sort of camera so that we can understand the surrounding. And we using the information about what's happening around you, converting this all into sound, taking that together, more like creating a language in the sound, and convey to you, convey to user, and let user interpret that information. And that's where I say it's called sensory augmentation, because it's not assistive technology, it's not a sensory aid. We are not saying user or left to you is a table, or right in front of you there's someone standing. We are not speaking out. We're just giving a clue, some sort of a language, like a table is a circle, then some sort of a combination of pitch and frequency and reverb waves. Put that together, give you an idea, this is a kind of a shape you are facing towards. Or someone's facial expression, someone is smiling, or laughing, or someone blinking or looking away from you, that sort of a clue. We're just packing this all information into a sound and convey this to user. And what we try, so there's a number of goals in there. We want to create this language as effective as possible. And we also hoping to see the user can have very effective learning with this kind of a technology. Learning in a sense, once we give the user a technology, they use few times, we create some training paradigm, and remaining part is taken care by their brain or neuroplasticity, and just let them adapt with the technology and make it integral part of their sensory system. So technology is not controlling anything. It's user is controlling everything. User is picking up this also information and interpreting what this is all about. And slowly they can create this sort of a context and environment understanding every time, whenever they want to see and whatever they want to see. So that's a goal of sensory augmentation project, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, how BCI taking place? Or I should say how brain signal taking place, using brain signal to filter out information. So so camera is taking up everything in front of you, right? But we want those everything taken in front of you, we convey to user only when user needed. So we also kind of controlling that way and filtering out so much information. For example, if I keep playing the sound to the user's ear, it might be annoying. It might be annoying for me. I want to hear something, but I also want to ignore something when I want. But it might not happen if it's not controlled by user, or maybe something naturally like a BCI or brain signal. So we're using brain signal to give this user some sort of an intentional or unintentional control. And again, this is sensory augmentation. It's also because if we imagine how we see the world, we just look very quickly, within a second, surround us, and we quickly understand the scene. We want to do the same with the sound as well, that kind of capability. So, and once this happen, and maybe user can switch it off, or maybe user can reduce the window, or maybe user can make it more focused in certain direction and ignore everything else, like how our eyes naturally do, because we're learning from childhood how to use our eyes, I assume. And if this is successful, that will be a successful sensory augmentation. And that's what augmentation is all here, if it makes sense.
Yes, this is quite interesting. And indeed, it gives the opportunity for humans to realize some abilities that have been attributed to superheroes, and also, of course, that certain animal species have. What you're describing in terms of enhanced auditory capabilities for blind people is essentially echolocation, which bats have and whales have. So that's quite fascinating. Now, I want to open this discussion for questions from the panel on anything that has been said so far: neuroadaptive BCI or sensory augmentation. Ben or Art Ramon, any questions?
If I may. One thing I meant to share last time was a coworker last week. He asked a question to the room, kind of. It was something like, if you could have the superpower to read others' minds, but while you were reading others' minds, your mind could also be read, would you take it? And I've been chewing on that one quite a bit over the last week. But anyway, just maybe it'll stick in your head like it has stuck in mine. Gennady mentioned wedge issues. That was the first question I came up with for today. What are, say, the top 3 wedge issues within the ethics of neuroenhancement realm at this time. I would take a 10-minute answer. I'm sure like in your echelon, Dr. Singh, like you guys are discussing like, oh man, this is okay. And then somebody else is like, no, this is totally not okay. What are some of these topics that are really heated right now?
Well, without BCI already, the data we are generating every day, like I'm talking with you, and we're using this technology to discuss. My computer is listening me, I'm interacting in my keyboard, this data is all logged in as well. You go on those social media, as all data is logged in as well. And this all data combined can give you quite well understanding who you are, what kind of tendency you have, what kind of cognitive traits you have, and so on, without any invasive technology, right? Now, when we talk about the brain, which is essentially who we are, so obviously there's a quite a fear. Having this data stream into a device or to a company, could be a Meta or Neuralink or maybe something new in the future. What else can be done with the data, right? It's not just, we already can understand with very little data we interact in every single day with our technology, that at least it looks like a little data, because just simple interaction. We are not telling any question and answer. We are not telling who we are, what we like, we don't like, but just by having little interaction with that, and this company can use this massive data technology to crunch this data and figure it out who we are with the brain signals. There will be something completely another level of information can be fetched out from us. In fact, it's interesting. I'm talking here today, and a few days ago I was watching a documentary called Triplet, which is a interesting, it's on Netflix if you're interested to watch. So this is documentary talking about that how people who were twins or triplet, they were separated at birth for psychology study of a question, what is more important, nurture or nature? This also raises a question on free will and so on. But why I'm indicating that, because we have a set of habits which always stay with us. Now, this interaction definitely can tell a lot about our interest and traits and this and that, but there's still their underlying phenomena, like confirmation bias, for instance, or something more even, like what kind of triggering information that can trigger your mental workload, anxiety, or stress, or what kind of triggering figure. For example, when you are too much stressed, you want to eat the chocolate, and the chocolate ad may be popping up in front of you. Think about that, right? And you are more prone to just click and buy it because you really want to have that right at this moment. So having the brain data access to companies, there's so much possibility what can be done with that, because it's literally is you, whoever we are, our personality, our conscious brain is in your brain data. And this brain data not necessarily have to be implant data, could be an EEG data that has been collected for the purpose of matching attention. But same data also contain a lot of more information that you may haven't picked up with the same analysis, and other algorithm maybe can further crunch it out to understand what's going on with that respect of that's one scenario. And as Gennady mentioned in very first introduction, I was working with IEEE brain co-chairing a group called Workplace Neuroethics in Workplace. Now think about the similar technology in the workplace kind of environment. Now workplace is very unique setting. When you're using a technology individually by yourself, you have a lot of control, and you don't need to give anyone to consent, and you can just switch it off whenever you want, switch it on whenever you want. But let's say you are in the workplace, you're looking for a job, and company asks you, if you need a job, I can give you the job, you have a right skill set, but you also have to give me consent that we can continue monitor you. And there's a most likely possibility because of wages involved, because of money is involved, you're gonna say yes. This happened. Workplace is always a first to try. And once you say yes, you get into a company, maybe every day working, now your attention is measured or concentration is measured, how much effort you're putting toward your task. And this all has been monitored and can be viewed by your manager, for instance. And manager can maybe decide how much to pay based on your concentration of level of every day and factor that in your salary. Maybe, right? So that's actually a big ethical concern for workplace kind of environment. So neurotech can do that. Another potential issues could be your brain your brain signal tells you your skill set in certain stuff is super, super good. But at the same time, your interest is in different things. So there's a bit of disassociation, your skill set versus your interest. And you don't want to do what you are so much skilled to, but you want to do something which you have more interest in. But your boss, your manager maybe monitor and identify that, and you just say, no, you do that task so that they can, benefit maximum from your skill set. There's another ethical issue. So there's really a lot of issues when we talk about brain technology out there. And definitely these required a lot of discussion. And that's kind of thing we are also doing with this neuroethics for workplace. We're trying to come up with a framework. In fact, I heard a few days ago, United Nations is setting up a committee to come up with a framework as well, because neurotechnology just growing a lot in last few years. Like it's getting popular, but at the same time, concern is also rising. No doubt in that these companies who want to harvest a lot of data from you to I don't know, do confirmation, like I say, cognitive nudging just to understand you, but same time also used for all sort of purpose, benefiting you or a company or some third party user. They just want to come up with a framework that does not let you do that sort of thing or does not let you further harvest. I give you an example. When we do experiment in university setting, of course, we also collect a lot of data, we take the consent, but the most important thing among all is we always make the data unidentifiable. So once you're analyzing the data, you don't know who is who. And that kind of protect that privacy issues you can think of. Similar issues could be raised for dream machine kind of thing, like a private thoughts, right? You are thinking about something which is not so acceptable in society, or maybe someone you are sharing with. You want to have a hold on that. So essentially, technology is developing. Maybe a solution is liberating with the fact that give this whole power to the user, that what can go out, what can't, and how the data is shared, what's not. But I think this kind of issue become a bit more complicated, bit more knotted when you are talking about workplace kind of setting or even defense kind of setting, which is even worse. I should not say worse, but a kind of workplace where you essentially follow order, right? Like a soldier instantly. And that's a reason you'll find that lots of defense organizations want to try out such kind of technology first. And not just want to try out first, because that's also more feasible to try, bit more going away from ethics and try out technology. Then it reflects to workplace environment, like a companies around us, monitoring you all the time and to maximize you. And someone asking me in the setting of workplace, what if when you go for your interview and they ask you to measure your brain signal, or maybe there's some sort of a salon or a device or unit that asks you to pass through that so that they can collect some data to identify what are your best skill set before they even offer the job. Not based on what you're interested in, but based on what your brain telling them, essentially. Our brain signal is telling them. And in addition to that, we also don't know so many things about the brain. It's really a huge mystery. There's so much thing in there we could not understand, or we don't have enough technology to understand every single thing. We're really on very surface level, and there's already a lot of possibility with the brain signals. And doing that sort of thing, diverting into a direction where using brain data for selecting people, identifying people, monitoring people, not just a good part, I'm talking about more of ethical and non-ethical issues, or even pursuing certain issue, like you go in an office of a salesman and they have this brain computer interface sort of technology that let them pursue what they want to sell in a way that can, very easily let you agree. That might be not go very well, right? So I don't know so much answers here, but these are definitely a consideration we have to tackle, we have to think about when we talk about BCI. And whatever I do here in university, we always think about these ethical issues. These are important. At the same time, it's also important we understand them as deeper as possible, because more deeper we understand, more we know what's possible ethically and unethically. And this understanding can help us to come up with some sort of agenda, or some sort of a control, or some sort of authority or framework that may able to allow us let these companies or these data crunching organization use the information in certain way. In fact, on that direction, we just started a project, a very simple, a pilot project, where we are trying to project all human data, more of a digital twin kind of a setting, and want to show to the user what possible with the same data if it keep collected for next a month or so. So essentially, you can project one data on you, and you can see in 2 months how that data can be utilized. So it's also important ethically to inform user how the data can be used, so they will be more educated and use the technology more realistically and more safely or ethically. If it answer
Yes.
you, but there's so much thing really. It's a big issue to think about, and we still just surf on very early surface, scratching the surface, understanding and developing the framework around that.
And these are indeed extremely important considerations. Of course, the US Transhumanist Party strongly supports individual privacy and individuals' ability to control their own data. I have advocated for a paradigm of individual ownership of data, where we each have the ability to disclose or not disclose aspects of our lives, aspects of, for instance, our genetic data, our health information, what we're thinking about, what our interests are, our financial information. And this should be up to us. It should not be up to third parties, in my view. So I know today there exists an immense industry of data brokers that harvest information, and sometimes not with our consent. Sometimes they harvest information, for instance, about our online activities, and we don't realize when we go to a particular website and we accept certain kinds of so-called cookies that they actually enable tracking by these third-party data brokers. And I do think this should be opt-in rather than opt-out kind of tracking, where people actually are informed of what could happen to their data, and they may even be paid if they do allow for that information to be used for other purposes. And what you mentioned regarding employers potentially monitoring people's activity, of course, there exist technologies today that, for instance, enable employers to monitor the usage of their computer systems, or even, for instance, how long a particular user stays in a particular window on an application, or engagement with the screen But generally speaking, those technologies have been hugely unpopular in the workplace, and employees who believe that they're being monitored in that way suffer immense hits to their morale because they tend to prefer a relationship of greater trust with the management and more of a long-term focus. So it's not what are you doing right at this moment? It's more of still a focus on productivity, but a focus on outputs over a longer period of time, days, weeks, months, where it's okay if you're not at your best at a given moment, because maybe that's even necessary for you to have a sustainable level of production. If you take a break, for instance, if you need to recharge, if you need to focus on something else, but that means you have more of a resource mentally to return to that activity later on and be more productive ultimately. So hopefully these kinds of nuances and these broader implications will be recognized, but certainly we need an institutional framework that places the individual first. And when it comes to our thoughts, especially, we need to have the ability to disclose or not disclose. And this would be extremely valuable information in many contexts. And I think if we add value to others when we provide that information, there should be commensurate rewards associated with that. So indeed, quite an important set of topics to continue discussing. Now, Art Ramon, I wonder if you have a question or comment on anything that has been said thus far.
Yeah, like a decade ago, I started learning sign language. And at the time, I was thinking it'd be a great interface for like VR, when you would have your virtual screen, rather than going into VR space and having to type on virtual keyboards, that maybe you can use sign language, because a sign could be a word, not having to peck, each single letter by letter to formulate words. So, but the technology that sort of could have used that or leveraged that, sign language input didn't take off. It was like a Google radar technology. It kind of died out. I forgot what it was called. But now with AI and sort of brain monitoring or reading, I'm wondering if maybe that could be used, say, for like the Apple Vision Pro, rather, I'm not quite sure what the interface is to input there, whether it reads your speech or not, but maybe some sort of reading of the brain signal to formulate those words, AI interpreting the words, you don't have to type letter per letter, and maybe using that for sort of input into like that sort of Apple Vision Pro VR software. So, I mean, I'm thinking, how would you see the words? I know this one guy had a device that measured the muscles in the vocal cords, and that was the way he was doing to formulate words. And he kind of had some predictive word ability with this device that was touching his vocal cords or something, and sort of seeing minute changes in the muscles or something other. But I'm not referring to that technology. I'm referring more to the brainwave reading. Have you ever tried testing people who are blind and to see how they generate words in their minds? Someone who doesn't have the usual five senses, or maybe someone who someone who's blind, see how they generate words, or someone who's deaf and see how they generate mental images in their brain, to see if there's any differences between people who don't have all five senses.
Well, that's very interesting. And because of the sensory augmentation project, I always become more curious about people who can't see, how they thought, like thought reconstruction I'm talking about, right? How it's going to work for them if they are blind from the birth, because they've never seen anything. So I'm not sure what kind of image might be popping up in their brain. It might be all based on the sound, right? But what you are saying, a language, essentially, a text, is all about language. And language could be of multiple form. It could be with the sign language, it could be with the spoken words, or it could be in some other way of interaction. I mean, animals interact with making some strange kind of sound with a variety of pitch and reverberation. Human can form a language with a complicated set of alphabets, and literally we have a bunch of language all around the world, right? And the location in the brain is dedicated for language. It's not the same as where you have thought reconstructed. It's not the same thing. So temporal lobe, which is more than on this part of the brain, that's where the language form. And interestingly, you mentioned, because this is one of the work, it's not my work, but also from UTS. If you Google it, it became quite popular. It came out in November last year, where the work has been shown EEG-based, very effective thought-based text communication or language communication. So essentially, you can use the brain signal to communicate and talk. Now, is it so effective? Well, feasibility point of view, yes, it can work. It's very nice. And things like a Vision Pro or maybe something else in the future, it would be very nice to have such kind of interaction. But generally, people who can speak specifically, speech detection, or what we call speech recognition, you calling Siri, for instance, calling Google, for instance, or calling Alexa, they are already so advanced at this moment, really. They can understand quite well what you're trying to talk, and not just understand, dissect what you have chat or said a word or sentence, and try to understand that as well. So this is called already quite advanced and can be used in this sort of a virtual reality headset, although Vision Pro call themselves special computing headset, for instance. But can we use the brain signal? I mean, we may not able to use that accurately we want. For example, if you are in virtual reality world and you have to input a password, which is a combination of alphanumeric alphabet, right? A very complex string. Might be coming up with your brain signal to just type that out. It might be not so efficient. And why is a problem? When we speak, our information transfer rate, we call it ITR, is very high. Generally, it's a 60 word per second, sometimes even 100 word per second. Some people speak fast and slow. But when we talk about BCI, that's how we measure how BCI effective, by the way. When we talk about brain-computer interface, the ITR is like a 6 word per minute, very, very slow. So it might be very effective for people with disability who can't do at all anything. But if we talk about healthy people like you and me, might be not so effective way. It might be more annoying way to communicate, because you're like, oh, it's so slow, and you don't want to go with that. And maybe typing, even though with that those keyword where you have to poke the keyboard button in virtual reality, it's a little bit even faster for that. So ITR point of view, or information transfer rate point of view, BCI not so effective to communicate at this moment. And maybe that's the reason I like more passive BCI, because I don't have to consider ITR at all. It's just happening in behind your brain. Even if it's slow or fast, it doesn't directly affect the user. But when you talk about real-time interaction or active BCI, ITR becomes so important, and communication is where a little bit of fuzzy things happening. But really, I recommend this video. If you look at UTS text from EEG, you'll find it's pretty interesting work has been came out last year from us. Not from me again, but the same lab that demonstrate this capability. And maybe we don't know, maybe we see in the future. Like I say, Apple AirPod have this EEG sensor, sort of looking sensor coming up in the future. And might be the purpose is to communicate, to adapt, do neuroadaptive things, and so on and so on. So much possibility, really. And I feel this commercial entity looking more on passive BCI at this moment, because that's our actual goal. Active BCI, on the other hand, might be a little bit more work has to done before it becomes so effective. How can we type or speak or use even eyeballs to interact? So yeah.
I sort of see where maybe an AI assistant being there all the time, sort of predictively doing things for you. to sort of increase that bandwidth. So, it's going to just pop up words of what you want to sort of come up with next. And then, yes, accept, and then quickly build out a sentence. Or, I want to go to a website and I don't have the link saved. Well, just populate the search bar and enter the website as close as it's reading it. And the AI is going to get the correct website. I don't have to recall the spelling, the particular spelling of a domain name or anything. It's the AI will sort of do that for you. That's kind of what I'm sort of envisioning, is maybe where you'll have that faster, throughput.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, really. Adding the AI as assistant to fill in the gaps, right? And make the whole information transfer rate become very fast. I mean, we already have something similar in our phones and all devices where you try to type the word and your suggestion pop in. And now with generative AI and so on, when you're writing email and remaining part of the sentence is, give you a preview, maybe you want to write that and you just put the escape bar and just sentence complete right away. Essentially really improving your information transfer rate. And that really can apply to brain signal as well. I think we are heading in that one. Like I said, the work we did that came from UTS is kind of in that direction. We are not using too much AI assistant, but let's say we have to use that to type. So I think little prediction what you want to type based on your few starting strings in your word and fill in the gaps by AI can improve significantly ITR. And that is something I think coming hopefully, if I'm not wrong, from Meta as well. That's what they're trying to do. Originally, that's the plan. Type using your brain signal. I'm not sure how far they are, but something along the line.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and this is a fascinating conversation. The information transfer rate limitations of today's active BCIs could be overcome if that limited information that is transferred essentially triggers a subroutine that then provides more information. So this could be a pre-programmed subroutine, or it could use generative AI. But for instance, if I'm communicating to you via a brain-computer interface and you ask me, well, how was your day? Maybe I've already written a narrative about my day and various activities, and all I have to do is prompt a few words to essentially trigger that narrative, and then that's what you get via the BCI. And generative AI could write something in my style, for example, if it's trained to do that, and then there could be a bit more variety. So quite an interesting set of prospects. Of course, another prospect would be to improve the information transfer rate over time. How long do you think it would take approximately for the information transfer rate of a BCI to begin to equal that of human speech?
Well, that's a very interesting question. How well we are really getting better in machine learning, and really there's a limitation is not so much from brain signal itself. They are really fast. It's more toward the end of where we're using this algorithm and try to predict what coming from the brain signal. And in that direction, we are really going very fast. I mean, literally accelerated since last couple of years with the help of generative AI and so on. So not too far, really. Maybe in just a couple of years, we're going to see something, information transfer rate from the brain signal, which is, well, in fact, this I should remind me, that's where the Neuralink kind of have advantage, actually. So information transfer rate of controlling the cursor on the screen is almost same as controlling the mouse at this moment with the Neuralink kind of technology. So ITR in that case is almost same. And the reason is because you are selecting a very specific part of the brain, and with the so much high density sensor, so you have a lot of data. So predicting that very fast is very easily possible, and that give you ITR very high. But the EEG, on the other hand, can't give you such kind of density of picking a brain signal because it's spread all over your head. It still is a bulky sensor, like a size of a half a centimeter, for instance, in diameter. So it still is a big size compared to implant. But at the same time, it has advantage of giving you a bit more broader view of your whole brain. So there's a little bit of trade-off. And maybe certain setting where Neuralink could work better or implant could work better, where communication is a key, people with disability. But on the other hand, neuroadaptive kind of setting might be work better with EEG kind of thing. So if you just compare via ITR, that's kind of a trade-off we have to make. But we are not so far, really. I know there's one work came out just 2 years ago that has been set a world record, came out from University of California, San Diego, with one of our collaborator, T.P. Jung, Professor T.P. Jung. So he established a world record of using EEG with the so far highest ITR using BCI, that can go up to, if I'm not wrong, actually I forgot the exact number, but it's pretty high, but not same as human ITR communication rate, but still one of the highest so far has been recorded. So we're definitely going in that direction very, very fast. And we see something very nicely in a couple of years, hopefully.
Yes, this is remarkable that this technology is advancing so rapidly. And when the information transfer rate of these BCIs begins to approach that of human speech, I think a lot will change about the ways in which we communicate. And we only have a few minutes left in this salon, but I hope to ask you one final question on this. Do you think this is a pathway toward overcoming some bottlenecks to our learning and our ability to process information right now? Because there's so much content, including content that is available for free, but our unaided minds can still only read so fast or watch videos or listen to podcasts so quickly. Even if we speed them up, we still have this bottleneck in terms of our brain's ability to take in information. Do you think BCIs are a way to overcome this bottleneck and enable our brains to learn much more rapidly than they can today with our current inputs?
So most of the BCI currently available out there is only one-sided. It's a one-way communication, really. Taking brain signal and do something with that. That's all BCI is all about. But the other way around, two-way communication, where this learning capability and, like I mentioned, dream machine or dream recording could be a way to go, where maybe there's a way to enhance your learning capability that can let you absorb the information much faster rate. There's some new technique also coming up, which is beyond this electrical signal measuring like a EEG or implant. It's called optogenetics, where you use optical signal to do the same thing. An optical signal allow you to switch on and off a single neurons and give you a lot more control what's possible in different part of the brain. But this is very early stage of those technology. And that can enable potentially certain skill set open and close, if you like, as you will. That sort of thing possible with some new neurotech coming up in the future, in some years, not future, not too far actually, next 4 to 5 years, it become more mature, more smaller. So it's possible, in short, yes, it's possible to categorize, accelerate the learning process you have, accelerate the training process. Training is actually a kind of focus always in BCI, and that's people are trying to do. But you see, great example from Neuralink again, because that's a demo just a few days ago, it's very fresh in memory. So the person, well, it's a little bit different, but person is able to control the cursor over the period of time and develop something called BCI as a skill that let him control the cursor very strongly, very well, like a mouse. But at the same time, if you talk about learning capability, yes, it's possible, but I haven't seen any too much work that give you a very significant increase and boost in your learning capability with the BCI. Possibility is yes, not so much has been out there so far.
Yes, thank you very much for that answer. It is really quite helpful for us to have received an understanding of the current state of BCI technology, the limitations that exist, as well as the great possibilities and the future directions. This is a field that we are going to need to monitor carefully, and we hope to have you back again to discuss further developments as they unfold. Thank you very much to Dr. Avinash Singh, and thank you also to Ben and Art Ramon for your excellent questions today. To our audience, I hope you enjoyed this salon, and I hope that we all live long and prosper.